potent symbol in the country of the failure of what was an ambitious experiment in not only developing public housing, but also more broadly in rethinking cities that have been over decades suffering broader post-industrial decline and the ravages of segregation and concentrated poverty. In many ways, not only is Pruitt-Igoe that symbol, but I think St. Louis, through the creation of Murphy Park and other early examples of a new generation of public housing redevelopment, has really been a leader in creating what are today's best examples of what we've learned from the failure of Pruitt-Igoe. St. Louis really has both the best and the worst of that history, and is a wonderful classroom, if you will, I think, for what we've learned over the last decades about how to really think about housing development in ways that can be successful. I think we went through a period in this country where urban planners and architects in particular were chastened by what happened with Pruitt-Igoe. The architect of Pruitt-Igoe was an idealistic, relatively young architect, went on to design the World Trade Center in New York, and he really symbolized, I think, a generation of architects who wanted to engage with social issues, with poverty and the decline of our cities, but approached it in a way that really looked at these areas as sort of a tabula rasa, a blank slate to be wiped clean and to completely reimagine all of sort of whole cloth. As Pruitt-Igoe was demolished in the early 70s, as many other of these experiments, particularly modernist experiments, failed, there was I think a withdrawing of ambition in not only for architects, but planners, policymakers, urban officials. But I think what's emerged over the last decade or more is a new sense of ambition, but directed really in a very different way. Where we are most successful today, unlike Pruitt-Igoe, that housing doesn't appear as something completely divorced from the rest of the neighborhood. It is, success today means that when you walk those streets, affordable housing is invisible in terms of its separation from any other housing or development in the neighborhood. You see buildings that include mixes of incomes, that have retail, and really fit within the context of that community. And so in some ways it may be harder to see the ambition there because it's not, unlike Pruitt-Igoe, you can't look at it and say, oh, well, that is public housing, that is affordable housing. You look at it and what you see is a whole neighborhood that's integrated in many ways that doesn't look that different from the surrounding context. And that I think is what has been so different about the approach, and also so successful about the approach that we've taken over the last decade or more, and really started in St. Louis with Murphy Park, is to think about neighborhood revitalization, not just public housing or low-income housing revitalization. It's critical to take an approach that really looks for existing assets. Again, to go back to Pruitt-Igoe there, what you did was really wipe out completely the existing context. And the approach that St. Louis needs to take, I think, like any other city, is to really understand existing assets and to try to weave any new development into the existing context. And in that sense, one of the things that most struck me, and I think you'll consistently hear from those who know St. Louis well, is the context and the history of the architectural legacy there is very, very strong. There's great architecture and design that has generation after generation. And so any approach, I think, has to really try to value the existing buildings that are there, look for every way to try to save and preserve them and weave them into the new development. And I don't think that means being sort of nostalgic or recreating the same architectural style over and over. The other thing I think that's absolutely critical is that any approach not be thought of as just a bricks and mortar approach, but to really think about what's going to drive in the long term the redevelopment and the longer term success of St. Louis. And I think the need for a job strategy and connecting employment to whatever is done in St. Louis is absolutely critical. And I think the strength that St. Louis has in terms of its university and medical assets and the connection to food production more broadly is a great opportunity. And so thinking about very specifically how to preserve and grow the existing industries and to attract new industries is a key part of a strategy. We understand today you can't think of housing as divorced from other strategies. And I think, again, that was a failure of Pruitt-Igoe and the earlier approach was it was built purely as housing without an integration of retail development or schools or more broadly a connection to job opportunities for the residents that ultimately led to its failure. And so much of what we're trying to do through Choice Neighborhoods and our other initiatives, like our Sustainable Communities Initiative, is to integrate affordable housing development into the broader community by connecting different incomes, different uses, connecting schools, early childhood development in so many different ways to create holistic redevelopment instead of the very much only focused on bricks and mortar, only focused on the lowest income that led to so many of the problems that we're trying to undo today.